Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. Listeners to Stone Ape may know that Heron and I disagree periodically, and we had a rather curious disagreement about the upcoming political election in the US, which, I don't know, I just found a little bit unsettling at the time. I've listened back since, and I feel more at peace listening back to it. I guess the emotion, the pausing, all this kind of stuff is a subject to the immediacy of the recording, and when you listen back, just listening back to audio, you don't really feel those same emotions, particularly after the fact. Many have noted, many Short Funk listeners have noted, that I have a relatively unique political perspective. And it's a political perspective that I think many in this country, particularly many that want to follow the major political parties, are quick to disregard. So, for example, when I say that the Democrats under Hillary Clinton are more to the right than the Republicans under Donald Trump, you know, what does that mean to someone? Like, what does left and right actually mean? Well, from my perspective, it's very simple. It's associated with the affiliation of banks, to a lesser extent, groups of lawyers, the insurance industries, the military, the industrial military complex, the prison complex. On a number of these issues, Hillary is actually more to the right than, well, what Donald Trump says. I mean, he says a lot of stuff. Some of it's all over the place, but you have to find a calm medium in the stuff that he says. And curiously, I mean, particularly with regards to banks and military intervention and all this kind of stuff, he's to the left of Clinton, which is very, very curious. Now, my particular political perspective comes in large part from my youth, from spending time with my father, going and interviewing union leaders and seeing what the active kind of militant union movement was like. When I was in later school, what they call college in Australia, but really through early university as well, I spent quality time with the son of a union leader who my father knew through his interactions, and I saw a certain level of corruption there, but really I have a relatively, textbook, certainly international textbook definition of what left and right is. Now, Trump is considerably more authoritarian than Clinton, and in this light, really, you know, from my perspective, you basically have an equidistance from a point which I don't even consider acceptable, where on the right you have Clinton, and the authoritarian at right angles to the right, you have Trump. They both strike me as very curious choices. And really, what I find even more curious is the justification that people use in order for their voting practices. And although it's now an old news point, the fact that people are more inclined to vote for Clinton will also argue that pneumonia isn't an important health thing, even though more people die from pneumonia than from gun deaths in the US. About 20,000 more. It's 33,000 and change, I think, from gun deaths, and I think it's 58,000 and change from pneumonia and influenza, they say. But actually, most of those are pneumonia deaths. It's actually really difficult to get information on the breakdowns, particularly associated with the poverty breakdowns, because I would assume the gun deaths and the pneumonia deaths are both coming from demographics disproportionately the poor, the extreme poor, in fact. But you can't actually gather this information in any meaningful sense because the gun death information they can't properly record, and the pneumonia death information and influenza death information, you can get some age breakdown, but you can't actually get any meaningful economic breakdown. So I always like to be able, ideally in situations where I feel comfortable to state my political opinion. But the thing that strikes me more than anything is the way in which people dismiss my political opinion based on the fact that I'm not an American. And I find that very curious because I've had the benefit of, and still do, international resources that are independent from the news media in the US, which is very, very curious. The news media in the US, I think, irrespective of the current Democrats and the Republicans, I think the news media is even more curious and bizarre and probably merits an independent study. Now, listeners to this podcast will say, well, Tom, you had the opportunity of creating a new podcast associated with political discussion. You could have done that. Yeah, I could have. But I'm talking about it on Short Funk here. And I find quite curious that, I don't know, maybe it's just the way you frame political discussions, because I found particularly associated with Democrats, and here Heron was talking about voting for Clinton, or probably will vote for Clinton, you kind of get this finger in the ears, kind of like, no, I'm not listening, no, I'm over-talking you kind of reaction, which I really find very, very curious. Like, I don't know. What can you say in these circumstances? So I ebb and flow associated with, I'm just not going to discuss politics or interact with anyone. even the people that don't know me particularly well know me in terms of having curious and always different opinions. And I find it quite striking that I can have curious and different opinions in almost any topic, but when it comes to politics, it's just not a topic that people are interested in talking about. But I find it very strange. I find it very strange that the Republicans, and I kind of predicted this because, Romney and Obama were basically dancing partners associated with their political perspective. And if you projected the Democrats were going to go to the right, the Republicans were probably going to be more authoritarian. But I thought the Republicans might still tack to the right. Anyway, it's a curious thing to have an independent narrative when the narrative is given by the media in this country. And the media is very curious indeed. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.